Hello, nice to see you on my channel, Hearts and Shadows. Enjoy watching.
My name is Dave. When I ran into my ex-wife and her husband on a plane, she made fun of me and called me the dropout guy. It bruised my ego back then, but what I found out afterwards shocked and changed everything I saw. 3 years ago, Jennifer ended our marriage of many years and left. She said she needed more in life than I could offer her at the time. And even though she didn't say it with malice, it still left a mark. She packed her things, took our cat, and didn't look back as she left. I didn't expect to see her again. Definitely not while boarding a flight to Denver. She was as beautiful as ever, dolled up in her Cartier watch, high-end blazer, walking hand in hand with a man who looked like he was pulled straight out of a Forbes profile. She noticed me first and decided to come meet me, introducing the man with her as her husband, and in front of a whole row of strangers, announced that I was her ex. I felt bad about this public embarrassment. What I didn't realize in that moment was that nothing she showed me that day was real. It would take a while for the truth to surface. But let me back up. Jennifer and I met in 2016 at a community college in Phoenix. We were just two broke kids trying to carve out a future with scholarships and part-time jobs. She worked at Target in the apparel section. I was doing tech support for a strip mall computer repair shop. We bonded over shared struggle, and in a strange way, that created something sturdy between us. We moved in together after 8 months of dating. Rent was $1,200 for a dusty one-bedroom with bad plumbing and carpet that crunched in places it shouldn't. We split it down the middle. We were practical like that and decided we would make things work. Our routines were simple, but our dreams were big. She talked about working in marketing someday in real corporate campaigns. I said I wanted a career in building everyday software and other tech-related things. We'd talk about where we'd live. Maybe kids eventually, when we have gained a proper footing in life, as none of us thought it was a good idea to bring a kid into this world to suffer. It all felt possible then. But even in those early days, there were signs that we saw the world through different lenses. Jennifer worried about stability. Even when we had enough to cover bills, she was anxious about what would happen if one of us got sick or was laid off. She hated unpredictability. It made her physically tense. If our grocery bill came out $20 higher than expected, she'd go silent in the car for the rest of the drive. She once told me that her biggest fear wasn't failure. It was looking like she was failing. She could handle a setback if nobody saw it. But public struggle? That was something else entirely. Her image mattered, and she protected at all costs, even if it involved lying. Even during our broke college years, she'd iron her clothes for class and organize her phone apps by color. It wasn't vanity, it was armor. And the thought of not looking like she had it together terrified her. At the time, I chalked it up to being practical. In hindsight, I think she was scared of being poor again. She had grown up watching her parents scrape by, and she once told me she never wanted to have to ask for permission to breathe. We soon graduated and talked about getting married immediately since we were already living together and sharing things. Our wedding was modest, held in her parents' backyard. I wore a $99 suit from JCPenney. She wore a dress she found on sale and altered herself. We toasted with plastic cups. To me, this was enough, even though it is far from what I wanted. We spent 3 nights in Sedona for our honeymoon. I had saved just enough for a basic Airbnb and a hike with a Jeep tour that promised mystic vortex energy. We laughed the whole way through it, half believing, half mocking. It was a good time. I believed we were in this together, and for a while we were. Soon after graduating and getting married, she got a junior marketing job for $35,000. I landed a salaried tech position making $42,000. We moved into a bigger apartment that was miles better than what we were staying in back in college. We adopted a cat from a shelter. But after some years in my job position, I felt I had found the solution to upgrade our lives. But this will turn out to be the worst decision I've ever made as an adult. After saving an amount of money I felt was considerable enough to last for a few months, I quit my job to start a mobile app business with my friend Marcus. The idea had been sitting in my notebooks for years, a streamlined project management app for small businesses. To me, it was a no-brainer because on paper, it was an idea that would work. We already did some testing and showed a few people I respected who asked me to give it a go. Jennifer wasn't thrilled, but she said she'd give me 6 months to try. She said she believed in me. That was the last time I remember hearing her say that without strain in her voice. Those 6 months turned into 18. The app worked fine, but getting users was war. I never imagined we would have difficulties convincing people that this app was what they needed. I was writing blogs, doing outreach, pushing updates, and building landing pages. I was doing anything and everything that was supposed to propel what we had into something big. It was a hustle, and most days it felt like yelling into a void. We had about 200 users, for a long while maybe. Made around $300 a month on a good stretch, which was nowhere near enough considering our expenses in keeping the business running. I picked up freelance work to cover what I could. I wrote code for dentist websites and fixed back-end bugs for food delivery startups. Some weeks, I made $800. Other weeks, I made nothing. Jennifer's salary covered almost everything. Rent, groceries, even my share of our car insurance. She never said she resented me, but the silence got louder each month. She'd scroll through her phone during dinner, pausing to point out friends getting married in vineyards, buying homes in expensive neighborhoods, or posting vacation photos. She never directly blamed me for what we didn't have. But the contrast she drew was deliberate. Her sarcasm turned sharper. She started calling me the CEO whenever she got home and saw me still in sweatpants. Once, when I tried to explain what I'd fixed that day, a bug that had been crashing user dashboards, she asked if that meant we could finally afford to buy new towels. I laughed. She didn't. There was a night we got into a fight about budgeting for our anniversary. I wanted to cook dinner and save money. She asked if I ever intended to take her somewhere nice again. That conversation ended with her sleeping on the couch and me staring at a blank screen in my code editor. The phrase "real job" became her refrain. She began staying out late. Happy hours, team dinners, networking. When she came home smelling like wine and menthols. Yet, I didn't confront her at first. I pretended like I didn't want to know. Or maybe I already knew and didn't want it confirmed. One night, she came home and after barely showering, she went to bed almost immediately. I came into the room to ask if she had something to eat earlier before coming home, but she was already sleeping. Right as I was about to leave, I noticed that her phone's notification light was blinking. Curiosity got the best of me, and I picked it up. Although it was locked, I could read some part of the message that came in. It was a message from Rob, a higher-up in the company she worked for, saying he'd had fun and hoped she'd gotten home safe. The rest of the message was cut off. I didn't know how to feel about what I just saw. I didn't tell her right away. I kept the knowledge like a splinter under the skin, painful, but hidden. Part of me hoped it was a misunderstanding. Another part of me couldn't face the truth. As I began paying attention to her, I started noticing everything. It was like watching your favorite book get rewritten in real time. Same cover, same setting, but the plot twisting into something you didn't recognize. A few days later, she claimed to be working late at the office. I thought about being romantic and brought her dinner as a peace offering. Her car wasn't in the lot, and the receptionist told me she had already left hours ago before I got there. When she got home at 11:30 p.m., I asked how the late-night work session went. She said it was exhausting. I said I'd been by her office. Her face froze for a second. She said she'd been out with friends I didn't know. When I asked who, she didn't answer. Then she said this wasn't working anymore. When I asked if she meant the marriage or the affair, she didn't deny either. She said she needed someone stable, someone ambitious, but practical. She said I was chasing dreams to avoid growing up. She wanted a house, vacations, and predictability. And she couldn't see that happening with me anymore. The divorce was uneventful on the surface, but emotionally brutal underneath. For months of dividing things and canceling joint accounts. We split $8,000 in credit card debt. She took the cat. I moved into a studio apartment that I could easily afford. She moved in with her new man, who, As it turned out, wasn't just a coworker, but a regional marketing director with the expensive life she wanted. She didn't gloat. Not directly. But I heard from a mutual friend that she told people she'd finally found a man with a plan. Her last words to me were that maybe this whole thing would finally make me serious about life. I carried that sentence with me longer than I should have. It echoed every time I looked at my bank balance or updated my resume. It was in the background when I interviewed for the tech support job. I didn't have any other option, so I took it. The startup died a quiet death. Marcus, my friend, took a job with a cybersecurity firm and stopped returning my messages. The domain for our startup expired. The last user unsubscribed from our mailing list on a Tuesday morning while I was resetting a stranger's router over the phone. I closed the browser and kept working. Still, things stabilized. I started focusing on myself. Moved into a better apartment. I started opening myself up to meet new people, especially women. I got promoted to $52,000. That felt huge, considering where I was coming from. It was during this time that I was to take a flight to Denver for a conference, my first in years. I bought a new backpack, practiced my elevator pitch. I was reading a business book at the gate when they called first-class passengers. And that's when my ex-wife walked up to me, looking beautiful, polished, and composed. She held hands with a man in his mid-50s. She walked over, pulling him along. She introduced him as her husband. Then she told him I was her ex-husband. She asked what I was doing these days. I smiled and told her I was doing fine these days. She turned to her new man and said I had once quit a great job to start a company. She described it like a hobby I'd failed to outgrow. I said the business didn't pan out, but I had tried. She smiled and told me, not everyone is built for entrepreneurship. Some people, she said, just needed structure. Her new man, she added, owned 3 car dealerships. They'd just gotten back from Aspen. She described their Paradise Valley home, 5 bedrooms, pool, mountain views, everything she'd once told me she wanted. Before boarding, she added that I do not look like someone who was doing fine in life, as I claimed, but whatever. As she walked away, I heard her tell her man that I was the dropout guy she'd mentioned before. She said she still couldn't believe she'd wasted 2 years of her life. I didn't say anything. I boarded with Group 5, took my seat, put on my headphones, and sat with that moment for the rest of the flight, trying not to let it change the way I saw myself. I could have corrected her and told her that I wasn't some failure because a vision and business I worked hard for didn't work out. But what would that have done? Won me back a point in a game I wasn't playing anymore. She wasn't looking for the truth. She was looking for confirmation, and it was no use trying to prove a point that doesn't matter. Some months later, I was at a barbecue hosted by an old friend I hadn't seen since my marriage fell apart. And there was another mutual friend of my ex-wife, Jennifer's former maid of honor. We hadn't talked in years. But after a couple of beers, we ended up standing near the fire pit, and Jennifer's name came up. I mentioned the plane, said she looked happy, said it was good to see she'd found someone who could give her the life she wanted. The friend's face changed. She asked if Jennifer had said she was married. I said yes. The friend looked away for a second, then told me something that rewired everything I thought I knew. Jennifer wasn't married. Not to the man she introduced as her husband. Not to anyone. According to her friend, they'd broken up about a month earlier. Apparently, Jennifer had quit her job shortly after our divorce was concluded last year, convinced a proposal was coming. She'd even told friends it was imminent. She started introducing the man I saw with her at the airport as her husband before he'd agreed to anything. The man, according to this friend talking to me, hated it and hated being pushed. He also hated the lies. When she gave him an ultimatum, marry me or I'm gone, he let her go. Jennifer had moved back in with her parents after this split. As I grapple with this new revelation, I sense that seeing me at the airport had probably been one of Jennifer's worst nightmares. Not because I was doing better, but because it highlighted that she wasn't yet married as she had thought. Again, I hadn't fallen apart like she needed me to. The story she had told herself that I was her problem, that I was the reason her life hadn't turned out, didn't hold up when faced with the realization that the rich man she was with was having doubts about legally making her his wife. I also hear that Jennifer had asked about me from another friend, like few weeks after her split. She was interested in knowing what I was really doing at the moment. I found that part the hardest to digest. Not because I cared what she thought, but because it meant part of her was still stuck too. She left me looking for more, but never really let go of what she'd already lost. And I think she wanted me to fail. Not because she was cruel, but because if I succeeded, it meant she had made the wrong bet. And nobody wants to admit they folded too early. It was clear to me that the moment at the airport where she introduced me as the dropout, that wasn't a victory lap. That was a performance by someone trying to outrun the truth by narrating over it. It is funny that after the plane ride, for days I carried her words around like a stone in my pocket. They surfaced in quiet moments. That phrase, the dropout guy I told you about, crushed me internally. But after hearing all these, I didn't feel smug or triumphant. Jennifer didn't leave me because I was a failure. She left because I couldn't provide certainty on her timeline. Because she wanted a finished product, and I was still building too slowly. She mistook stillness for stability, and I mistook her disappointment for truth. Looking back now, I realize we weren't speaking the same language. She wanted a future that looked like the inside of a home magazine, polished, intentional, complete. I wanted something living, something we could shape together. But here's what I never fully saw while we were together. Jennifer had a kind of silent panic about falling behind. She never said it out loud, but I could feel it in the way she reacted to her friends' updates, engagements, promotions, housewarming parties. Every announcement from someone else was like a ticking clock in her chest. If we weren't winning, she felt like we were losing. And I, in my optimism, thought the love we had would buffer us from all that. It didn't. Today, I have no illusions. I'm not rich. I don't have 5 bedrooms or a BMW. But I'm not scrambling either. I have peace. I have mornings without dread. I have conversations without tension. I have work I'm good at and friends I trust. I have my own version of enough. If you ever run into your ex and they try to sell you a story, remember this. The loudest people are often the most afraid of silence.